Welcome back to another great show at the Crime Bowl podcast with Bill and Jill, where it's true crime, no bull.
Absolutely.
Please like and subscribe.
Yes, please do.
To all our listeners, may you find peace in your hearts and in these streets.
Yes.
Now, let's solve some crime. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a case that's both puzzling and deeply unsettling, the death of Kendrick Johnson.
Yeah.
You've sent us some articles about this case.
Right.
And it's one that sparked a lot of debate and controversy.
It certainly has.
Yeah.
This case really highlights the complexities of forensic investigations and the importance of public trust in those investigations.
Right. So let's set the scene for our listeners who might not be familiar with this case.
Okay.
We're going back to 2013 to Valdosta, Georgia, and Lowndes High School.
All right.
Kendrick Johnson, a 17-year-old student, was found dead inside a rolled-up gym mat.
And these aren't the kind of mats you might picture in a yoga studio.
Right.
We're talking about large, heavy mats, the kind used for high school wrestling or gymnastics, often stored upright, standing in a row.
Exactly. So the image of someone being found inside one of those is already jarring.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, how could someone end up in such a position?
That was the question on everyone's mind. And the initial investigation by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, along with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, seemed to offer a quick answer.
Okay.
Accidental death.
They concluded that Kendrick had climbed into the mat to retrieve a shoe.
Apparently, kids would sometimes store their shoes in there
Oh, wow.
and became trapped.
Okay.
Their theory was that he got stuck, panicked, and ended up suffocating, a situation known as positional asphyxia.
So essentially, his own body weight in that confined space restricted his breathing, leading to his death.
Exactly. It's a rare occurrence, but
Yeah.
tragically, in this case, it seemed to fit the circumstances.
Hmm.
They pointed to the fact that Kendrick was seen on security footage entering the gym, but not leaving,
Right.
seemingly supporting their conclusion that he never left the gym and must have died there.
But if it was that simple, I guess we wouldn't be here dissecting this case years later.
Right.
Kendrick's family, right from the start, expressed their strong doubts about this explanation.
Of course.
They just couldn't fathom how their son, a strong and athletic young man, could have become so helplessly trapped in that manner.
Yeah, you can understand their skepticism.
Absolutely.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, and their skepticism was further fueled by the fact that there was a significant time lapse between when Kendrick was last seen and when his body was discovered.
Right.
We're talking about a 24-hour gap.
In a busy high school environment, you'd think someone would have noticed sooner.
Especially given that the mats were in a fairly visible area of the gym.
Exactly. It's a strange detail.
And it wasn't just the timeline that troubled them.
Right.
The articles you provided mentioned some disturbing details about Kendrick's physical condition when he was found.
Yes, the articles describe his face as being severely swollen and discolored, and his arms were contorted in a way that seemed unnatural. These details didn't align with the picture of a simple suffocation, adding another layer of mystery to the case.
So at this point, we have conflicting information and a grieving family that's not buying the official story.
Right. A lot of unanswered questions.
What happens next?
Well, driven by their doubts and the inconsistencies they saw, the Johnson family made the decision to have a second independent autopsy conducted.
Okay.
And the results of that autopsy were quite shocking.
Shocking is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
This second autopsy painted a completely different picture than the first one.
Right.
Instead of pointing to positional asphyxia,
Uh-huh.
it suggested that Kendrick's death was caused by blunt force trauma to the neck.
In other words, this new autopsy raised the possibility that Kendrick had been assaulted,
Wow.
turning what was initially considered a tragic accident into a potential homicide investigation.
And I imagine this finding just added fuel to the fire of suspicion surrounding the case, especially for the Johnson family, who were already questioning the official narrative.
Absolutely. And at this point, the investigation starts to unravel a bit further when the issue of missing security footage comes to light.
Okay.
This becomes a central point of contention in the case.
Okay, let's unpack this missing footage issue.
All right.
What exactly do the articles tell us about that?
Well, according to the articles, crucial segments of the security footage from the gym were missing. Not just a few minutes here and there,
Right.
but large chunks of time, including the critical hours when Kendrick would have likely died.
Wow. Hours of missing footage.
Yes.
That's a pretty big gap, especially in a case where every detail seems crucial.
It is.
What explanation was given for this missing footage?
The authorities claimed that the security system wasn't recording continuously,
Okay.
but rather it was motion activated.
So if there was no activity in certain areas, those periods wouldn't have been captured.
Exactly.
But you'd think a high school gym, especially during school hours, would have almost constant activity.
You would think
For hours of footage to be missing, that seems a bit hard to believe, doesn't it?
that's exactly the sentiment that fueled suspicions of a possible cover-up.
Right.
The missing footage, coupled with what many perceived as a rushed conclusion by the initial investigation, raised serious concerns. It seemed too convenient to some, especially to those who were already skeptical.
So this lack of clarity,
Hmm.
the conflicting autopsy reports,
Right.
and the missing footage,
Right.
all of this creates a perfect breeding ground for speculation and, of course, conspiracy theories.
Absolutely.
What are some of the prominent theories that emerged from this case?
The articles you provided delve into some of those theories.
Okay.
One of the most prominent ones suggests that Kendrick was involved in an altercation with other students, possibly over a girl, and that influential families intervened to protect those involved, leading to a cover-up.
So the classic scenario where someone in a position of power tries to shield their own child, even if it means suppressing the truth about what happened to someone else.
Exactly. And to add fuel to that theory, the articles mention a specific classmate who reportedly had a history of conflict with Kendrick and whose family had connections to law enforcement.
Oh, wow.
That detail really fanned the flames of speculation.
It's like something out of a movie plot.
Right.
A small town, a tragic death, powerful figures pulling strings in the shadows.
It's a familiar trope.
But this is real life, and a young man lost his life.
Yes, this is a real tragedy.
Did any of these investigations ever uncover any concrete evidence to support these theories?
That's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
Despite numerous investigations, including one by the Department of Justice, no conclusive evidence was found to definitively prove any of the theories surrounding a cover-up or foul play.
So we have conflicting autopsies, missing footage, a grieving family searching for answers, and the swirl of conspiracy theories.
It's a very complicated case.
This case just keeps getting more and more complex.
It does.
What else do we need to know?
Well, there's another disturbing detail that emerges from the second autopsy that we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
It involves the state of Kendrick's body when it was examined.
Okay, this is where I remember things taking an even darker turn.
Yes, this is where things get really strange.
What exactly did they find during the second autopsy?
The second autopsy revealed that Kendrick's internal organs were missing.
What?
And not just missing.
Yeah.
His body cavity had been filled with newspaper.
Newspaper. Wait, what? That's incredibly strange, to say the least.
It is.
I'm struggling to even wrap my head around that.
It's a bizarre detail.
What possible explanation could there be for something like that?
The funeral home that handled Kendrick's body explained that this was a standard procedure when organs are too damaged or decomposed to be preserved. They claimed it was necessary for the embalming process.
But I'm guessing the Johnson family didn't find that explanation very convincing.
They absolutely did not. They saw this as another attempt to conceal evidence, another layer of the alleged cover-up. They believed it was a deliberate effort to hide potential internal injuries that might have supported the theory of a violent death.
So faced with these disturbing discoveries and what they perceived as a lack of transparency and a failure to properly investigate, what did the Johnson family do?
They refused to give up their fight for justice for their son.
Wow.
They launched into a series of legal battles, filing multiple lawsuits against the school local law enforcement, and even the students they believed were involved in Kendrick's death.
I can't imagine the emotional toll this must have taken on them.
It's unimaginable.
It's a fight against a system that often seems designed to protect itself, especially when powerful figures are potentially involved.
It can feel like an uphill battle, for sure.
What were the outcomes of these legal battles?
Unfortunately, they faced numerous setbacks.
Oh.
Many of their claims were dismissed in court. The Department of Justice investigation, which lasted for several years, concluded in 2016 with no criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence. Even when the case was briefly reopened in 2021, no new findings emerged that would change the course of the investigation.
So after all of that, after years of fighting, the case essentially remains unsolved.
That's right.
No one has been held accountable for Kendrick's death.
That's the tragic reality of this case.
No.
The official explanation remains accidental death, but for many, including the Johnson family, the doubts and questions linger.
This is such a heartbreaking story on so many levels.
It really is.
It's hard to even know where to begin processing all of this.
I understand.
What are the key takeaways here?
There are several layers to consider. First and foremost, there's the human tragedy of a young life cut short and a family left grappling with unimaginable grief and unanswered questions.
It also raises serious concerns about trust in law enforcement and the justice system, particularly when it comes to cases involving young black men.
You're right, this case really highlights the importance of thorough investigations and the need for transparency and accountability, especially when the circumstances surrounding a death are questionable.
It also makes you think about how we as a society determine what constitutes justice.
That's a great point.
Is it simply the absence of a criminal conviction, or is it something more than that?
That's a complex question. And then there's the broader societal context.
Okay.
Kendrick Johnson's case, sadly, isn't unique.
Right.
It reflects a larger pattern of skepticism and distrust within communities of color when it comes to the fairness and impartiality of the justice system.
It's a sobering reminder that justice isn't always guaranteed, and that sometimes the system fails those who need it the most.
A very important point.
Yeah.
Which is why cases like this are so important to discuss and analyze.
Oh, yeah.
We need to keep asking questions, demanding accountability, and advocating for a more just system for everyone.
This entire deep dive has been incredibly heavy. There's no doubt about that.
It is a heavy case.
It's left me with a lot to think about.
I can imagine.
What are your final thoughts on all of this?
What resonates most with me is the sheer tenacity of the Johnson family. They faced an incredible amount of adversity, yet they never wavered in their fight for justice.
Right.
It speaks to the depth of their love for their son and their unwavering belief that the truth had yet to be uncovered.
Their story is a reminder that even in the face of immense challenges, hope and the pursuit of truth should never be abandoned.
And that brings us to a question for you, our listener.
Okay.
What would you do if you were in the Johnson family's shoes?
That's a tough one.
How would you navigate this complex system while grappling with unimaginable grief?
That's a profound question to consider.
It is.
We encourage you to keep learning about this case, examine the available evidence, and form your own conclusions.
Yes.
What does justice look like to you in a case like this?
That's something for all of us to think about. They absolutely did not. They saw this as another attempt to conceal evidence, another layer of the alleged cover-up.
Right.
They believed it was a deliberate effort to hide potential internal injuries that might have supported the theory of a violent death.
So faced with these disturbing discoveries and what they perceived as a lack of transparency and a failure to properly investigate, what did the Johnson family do?
They refused to give up their fight for justice for their son. They launched into a series of legal battles, filing multiple lawsuits against the school, local law enforcement, and even the students they believed were involved in Kendrick's death.
I can't imagine the emotional toll this must have taken on them.
It's unimaginable.
It's a fight against a system that often seems designed to protect itself, especially when powerful figures are potentially involved.
It can feel like an uphill battle for sure.
What were the outcomes of these legal battles?
Unfortunately, they faced numerous setbacks. Many of their claims were dismissed in court. The Department of Justice investigation, which lasted for several years, concluded in 2016 with no criminal charges, citing insufficient evidence, even when the case was briefly reopened in 2021. No new findings emerged that would change the course of the investigation.
So after all of that, after years of fighting, the case essentially remains unsolved.
That's right.
No one has been held accountable for Kendrick's death.
That's the tragic reality of this case. The official explanation remains accidental death, but for many, including the Johnson family, the doubts and questions linger.
This is such a heartbreaking story on so many levels.
There really is.
It's hard to even know where to begin processing all of this.
Yeah.
What were the key takeaways here?
There are several layers to consider. First and foremost, there's the human tragedy of a young life cut short and a family left grappling with unimaginable grief and unanswered questions.
It also raises serious concerns about trust in law enforcement and the justice system, particularly when it comes to cases involving young black men.
You're right. This case really highlights the importance of thorough investigations and the need for transparency and accountability, especially when the circumstances surrounding a death are questionable.
It also makes you think about how we as a society determine what constitutes justice.
That's a great point.
Is it simply the absence of a criminal conviction, or is it something more than that?
That's a complex question, and then there's the broader societal context. Kendrick Johnson's case sadly isn't unique. It reflects a larger pattern of skepticism and distrust within communities of color when it comes to the fairness and impartiality of the justice system.
It's a sobering reminder that justice isn't always guaranteed, and that sometimes the system fails those who need it the most.
A very important point,
Yeah.
which is why cases like this are so important to discuss and analyze. We need to keep asking questions, demanding accountability, and advocating for a more just system for everyone.
It's a case that really forces us to confront the limitations of our justice system and the complexities of truth-seeking. And even though it's been years since Kendrick's death, the lack of definitive answers continues to fuel speculation and debate.
It's a testament to the enduring power of this case and the deep-seated need for closure, both for the family and for anyone who's followed this story. There's a sense that something just doesn't add up, and that lack of resolution can be deeply unsettling.
We see that a lot in these types of cases, especially when there's a perception that information is being withheld or that powerful figures might be involved. It erodes public trust, not only in the specific institutions involved, but in the system as a whole.
Absolutely. And when that trust is broken, it becomes incredibly difficult to rebuild. It also highlights the importance of media coverage and public awareness. Cases like this often fade from the headlines, but the families continue to search for answers long after the public spotlight has moved on.
That's why platforms like ours are so important. We need to keep these conversations going, shed light on these unsolved mysteries, and amplify the voices of those who are still seeking justice. Kendrick Johnson's story is a powerful reminder that even in the age of information, some truths remain elusive.
And it underscores the human cost of these unsolved cases, the families left with unanswered questions, the communities grappling with doubt and suspicion, and the lingering sense that something just isn't right.
It's a heavy burden to carry, and it's one that the Johnson family has been shouldering for over a decade. It's hard to fathom the strength and resilience they've shown in the face of such adversity.
Their story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. It's a testament to the power of love, the unwavering belief in one's child, and the refusal to accept anything less than the truth.
And ultimately, that's where we're left with a deep sense of empathy for the Johnson family and a renewed commitment to seeking justice, not just for Kendrick, but for all those who have been denied a fair and thorough investigation.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in demanding accountability and working towards a system that truly serves and protects everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances.
This deep dive has been challenging, but it's also been incredibly important. Kendrick Johnson's case deserves our attention, and his family deserves answers.
And hopefully, by keeping the conversation going, we can contribute to a greater understanding of these complex issues and push for a more just and equitable society.
As always, we encourage our listeners to continue exploring this case, do your own research, and form your own opinions. What does justice mean to you, and what can we do collectively to ensure that everyone has equal access to it? These are questions worth pondering as we reflect on Kendrick's story and the many other cases like it that continue to haunt us.
And until next time.
True crime, no bull.